Hey, what's up, YouTube? Today I wanted to talk about astrology. Um, how does I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to talk about just astrology in general, how to look at a birth chart, and then how it applies to something like religion in general. So, one thing that's interesting is that if you look at the chart of a lot of the prophets, they all have a similar thing in their chart, and it's called an aspect. And an aspect is basically how the planets, the angle they create amongst each other. And so, what all the prophets have is they have a Saturn conjunct Jupiter opposite the sun. So, what does conjunct mean? Conjunct means next to. So, basically, in their chart, they have Saturn and Jupiter next to each other, and it's opposite of the sun. And so, within astrology, this is termed as the greatest aspect. And it's really people term coined it that term, and then they started to look at the prophets like Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they saw it in there. I did a birth chart on Solomon, peace be upon him. But it's really interesting that astrology is kind of confirming that these people were divine in their own way, which is interesting. You can see it being applied to religion now. um, you know, how do you calculate an astrology chart? Well, first of all, the main big thing is that astrology isn't just your sun sign. It's not just the month you're born. And in actuality, I remember the first time I got introduced to astrology, it was like on Facebook. I saw, there's this one little stupid thing they have on Facebook where it's like, put in your birthday and we'll give you your sign, and it gave me a Libra. Now the issue is, it's kind of based on the month that you're born, and I was just thinking, man, how are 1 out of 12 people exactly the same? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I kind of just, and I was right because that's not what astrology is. So I just kind of rejected astrology, like whatever, it doesn't make sense, and how are our planets affecting us, blah blah blah. And then so I kind of talk about the story about that day I made the hat, and I prayed that I would meet someone who'd bring me closer to God. I made a prayer to God, and that day I met a girl who's like, "Oh, your energy's good," and I didn't really believe in people could read energy, but she also, ended up saying like, "You're a Scorpio," and then I was like, no, I didn't even know what the hell a Scorpio was at the time, but I'm like, no, I'm born in October, I'm a Libra, and so she's like, "Oh, well, there's more. Astrology isn't just the month you're born; it's a lot more." So I was like, "Okay, I'm listening." So there's something called an astrology birth chart. Now, to figure out what someone's astrological signs are, not their sign, because it's not one sign, it's multiple, there's multiple things that go into play here. You can go on and look up an astrology birth chart. Now, it's an automatic process right now that does the whole calculations, but in order to get the result, what you need to input is your exact birthday, right? It's not your month, it's your exact day that you're born. This is the part that people don't know. It's even the time that you're born, which if you live in America and you have a birth certificate, it's going to tell you, the time you're born in your birth certificate. And then it's also the location that you're born, down to the exact city. So these are things that people don't really apply when figuring out their chart. Now, another thing is that there's an assortment of planets, okay? There's a sun sign, which everybody knows about. That's the main one people talk about. Then there's the moon sign, and then there's the rising sign. Now, those are the big three: the moon, the sun, the rising. Some people call it ascendant, same thing. Those are the big three. But after that, there's the Venus, there's the Mars, there's the Jupiter, the Saturn, um, even Pluto. And then after that, there's the aspects. Now, just like I talked about before, all the prophets, they have, you know, Jupiter conjunct Saturn, and aspects just means, if you think about the solar system's a circle. So if you have it, just the aspects just means how the angles the planets form amongst each other, right? So they kind of form like shapes, and that's where sacred geometry comes into play. But that's a big one, and that's the most difficult thing. And then there's also something called a house system, and that's a little bit more difficult too. But there's a lot of aspects in basically, looking back on my old self, saying, because I'm analytical, and I'm like, hey, how can 1 out of 12 people be exactly the same? I know other people who are born in my month, and we're not similar. So how does this make sense? Well, when you actually do a birth chart, it's impossible to have um, two people have the same exact chart. It's just there's so many aspects that it's like 1 in a billion. I mean, probably more than that two people have the same chart. So after that, it started to make more sense. Um, and she does my chart, and lo and behold, I have 5 planets in Scorpio. Um, and so that's when I started to get into it. And if you want to get into it, well, where do you start? Well, the first thing is there's so many videos out there that go into specific sign and then go in depth about that individual sign. So you'll start to figure out the energy. You'll figure out the energy of Aries, the energy of Libra, the energy of Scorpio, the energy of Capricorn, the energy of Virgo. You're going to kind of figure out, what those mean. You're even going to figure out the mythology behind it, the symbolism behind it. And it's going to make a lot of sense. And now, a good way to start is to also realize that every astrological sign has an element it falls under. And so, what does that mean? So, for example, my big three is my sun is in Libra, my moon is in Aries, and my rising slash ascendant is in Scorpio. And so, when you look at the water sign is Scorpio, Cancer, Pisces. And just like water, water is very fluid, it forms into whatever it's put into. So, what does that mean? That means water signs are the emotional type. They kind of absorb energy because if I put water into a cup, it's going to form to that cup. If I pollute water, the whole water becomes dirty. So water absorbs, right? If I want to clean something, I put water on it because water tends to absorb with things. And also in a lot of religions, whether it's baptism or Muslims doing wudu, water plays a part, and water can be a channel for energy. So these people can be, you know, into what would be considered spirituality, like what my channel is about. And Scorpios in particular are into the occult, and a lot of what my channel is occult stuff. Um, Now the air signs, what are the air signs? They're Libra, Gemini, Aquarius. What is air do? Air signs, they tend to be a little bit more fluid, more so than water, because not only do they form to the container, they don't really form, right? If I release air into a room, it just bounces and bounces, and the particles are going crazy. So one thing about airs is that they're not solid. They're very fluid in that, like, let's say there's Democrats and Republicans and they beef with each other. The air signs might be able to look at both sides of the equation, specifically Libra. Libra is known to be the diplomat. Right now I'm Palestinian, the Israel-Palestine conflict is popular. Someone like a Libra would make a good diplomat, because they can see both sides and try to meet a middle ground. Um, and then you have the fire signs, which I have Aries in me. Think about fire. It burns. It's passionate. It can spread. Um, you think about excitement, people who like to play sports, people who are fiery. When you describe someone as fiery, that's what the fire signs would be. So that's Aries, Leo, Sag. I have Aries in my moon. They're into sports. They might be a little bit more impulsive, especially when they're younger. And then you have the earth sign. So what do you think about the earth? The earth is still, the earth is gold, the earth is mountains, the earth is trees. So they like to be out in nature because earth is nature. Um, they're kind of opposite of water if you think about it. And so because of that, they might not be into spirituality. They're really grounded. Um, they might not be the most intelligent signs, but they are hardworking, because what do we work for? We work for money, which is based on gold, and gold is part of the earth. They're very stubborn. They're hard to change because you can't really move them out. It's like when people say expression, it's like moving a mountain. You can't really move a mountain. Where air, they can be very you can kind of, they're more fluid because air forms to whatever it's in. Um, and so that's just a basic, is a good way to look at it. Is, are you earth dominant? Are you water dominant, fire dominant, air dominant? And then not just what does dominant mean? So I have 5 planets in Scorpio. I have a lot of planets in the 12th house, and my 12th house is in Scorpio. 12th house has to do with Pisces because it's in the sign of Scorpio. Scorpio is a water sign. I have 5 planets, so I'm mostly a water sign. And even people who don't know astrology, who are just um, spiritual based, have always told me that I'm a water dominant person. Um, Now, but if you look at my big three, I have a fire and then I have an air. So what does water, fire, and air kind of combine to? It's basically like a hurricane, right? You're having fire, so it's hot. You're having, wind, and then you're having water. So it's that's kind of like what I would be described as. I don't have any earth in me, so I don't have that grounding force in me. Ultimately, you'll meet people who are very balanced, and they might just be balanced personality wise. Obviously, it depends on maturity and upbringing and a whole bunch of stuff, but that plays a part into it. Um, so ultimately, look at your big three, and that's a good way to start with. Um, look at your dominance. Do you mostly have a bunch of planets in one sign? If you do have a bunch of planets in one sign, It's really easy because you can just say, oh, this planet, this sign applies to me. But let's say you have a lot of Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces in you. You can say, oh, I'm water dominant because those signs are relatively the same. All the same elements are very similar to each other. Um, and then how do you figure out if it's kind of legit once you've really studied all the signs, and then you've studied, oh, what does this moon sign, what does it mean? What does the moon sign mean? What does the sun sign mean? What does the rising sign mean? You can start to observe other people, and this is really easy nowadays because more people are really into astrology, and also something like Snapchat. Even it actually tells your birth chart right then and there, so you can look at your friends list and start to see and say, hey, this person, they have a air sign sun, they have an air moon, and they have an air rising. I'm going to look up the astrological air signs, and say, and see, does it match kind of the person's personality, and if it does, you can kind of go from there. Now, importantly, how can you utilize astrology? Well, there's a lot of ways you can utilize astrology from a spiritual perspective. First and foremost, it helps you understand yourself. So that's what a lot of people want to do, especially in their 20s. It's like discovering themselves. You want to know about yourself and what's good for you. Here I am. I have a Libra sun and I have a Scorpio rising. Libras, air signs are the sign of speaking. Water signs, specifically Scorpio, are the sign of spirituality. And here I am speaking about spirituality. So it's good for my soul to do something like this. And I genuinely enjoy it. Um, so figure out yourself. Are you a water dominant person? Maybe you need to involve yourself in water activities. Do you have a lot of fire in you? Maybe you need to involve yourself in fire based activities. Maybe join a gym, get into sports, exercise, whatever. Are you an earth sign person? Do you feel like you're very much into your work and in status and stuff like that? Maybe you can try to let loose a little bit. It's helping you figure out about yourself. Now on the other spectrum, it's also about helping you figure out the people around you. So the more I can figure out about the people around me, the more I can relate to them on a level, the more I can understand why they do the things that they do. I mean, as far as also not just understanding yourself, it's also improving yourself. Because I have a lot of planets in Scorpio. What is one of the negatives of Scorpio is revenge, right? Is wanting to get people back. And that's something that I have to improve myself upon. And I've done that in the past. And it's kind of like, for me to be self-aware of that, I can say, okay, this is something that I might have a problem with. Let me try to improve upon that. On the other end of the spectrum, I could say, okay, well, Scorpios are also strong intuition, strong in spirituality. That's something I need to focus on. Um, I might meet someone who's like, you know, an Aquarius, and they don't want to be tied down. Let's say I want a relationship with them. Aquariuses don't want to be tied down. They don't like relationships. They're very different in their way of thinking. I could try to convince that person and change the way they are, but at the end of the day, I can't really. You can't really change people. You can sort of change them. Um, I have a crazy mother. She's a Cancer. There's a lot of other issues in there, but she's got a Leo in her as well, and so because of that, there's a lot of pride, and there's a lot of like, Cancers are kind of like the cry babies, so it's like really difficult to deal with her. But I have to understand that. I have a sister. She's got strong Sag energy, and I see it in her. She likes to. She's very energetic, very you know, fun. And so for me, it's kind of like, okay, well, she also has hip problems, and so even your astrology can show you problems of your whatever. Every astrological sign rules a part of your body. So because she has so many planets in Sag, it makes sense that her hips are an issue. But it's a good thing that I always try to get her to the gym because she's a fire sign. She needs that. Also, I try to, I when she gets to the gym, I tell her to do rehabilitative exercises for her hips. So I mean, it goes from all the way to understanding yourself, to understanding the people around you, to preventing health issues, to fixing issues that you may be having. Um, to be able to relate better to the people around you, and even just so much as to see that, you know are these prophets real people, are they just BSing? Well, the proof is in the numbers, because astrology is numbers at the end of the day. I mean, people can't choose when they're born and this and that. They can't make that stuff up. So when you look at someone's chart, you're even going to see numerology in their chart. One of my buddies, he's very spiritually gifted. And what I see with him when I do his chart is he was literally born on like 111 uh, uh, in and I look at his chart and I see a lot of like ones and 11s, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense why he's spiritually gifted. So it's just one of those things where it should prove the supernatural is real. It should help you. It's interesting because all the prophets had the same aspects, a similar chart in them, so they weren't making up what they were saying. But yeah, just keep it in mind and get into it. It's a very interesting study. Thank you very much.